What's up, guys? I wanted to come on here because I've been circling some ideas and some truths, maybe, or feelings about many different topics. I've been collaborating with ChatGPT, and my parents are at church, so it's the perfect time right now. The dog's asleep, taking a nap. Um, And usually I get this burst of interest. I just took a neurodivergence test and I got a very neurodivergent score. And I put that into ChatGPT and from what it knows about me to give me some advice and analysis. And I've got a therapy appointment with a specialist tomorrow, so that'll be cool. Like the first therapy appointment in my life. So that's all kind of the context, but the topic is the Matrix. So my brother, who is obsessive about movies, has been his whole life and is in the movie industry, he said that or we were talking about like defining movies, and I said instinctively that The Matrix was a defining movie of my life to watch. And my other brother is someone who got me onto thinking about like how my social media profile shows some neurodivergent tendencies. So this has been a close collaboration of my family. But one of the advantages of my particular neurotype, which is a word I've learned today, is that I see things in layers, and I see cross ideas, how they cross the meaning below situations. Like, for example, one neurodivergent tendency is to obsess about something or to get really into texture. Texture is a word that keeps coming up, and I've done entire books on this texture of sidewalk and markings on sidewalks, and so that I think my brother's right on that's definitely a focal point, neuroatypical, let's say. So that's literal texture or literal meaning beneath a texture. So I thought about how sidewalk, even though it's this, if you think of it three-dimensionally, let's say it goes down this much or whatever. I don't really know. But below that, there's pipes, there's soil. In a way, sidewalk is, or concrete, divides us from potentially a food source. We could till that ground and make crops to feed ourselves, and then we wouldn't need to walk to the store to buy crops to feed ourselves. So it's that kind of thinking that I'm talking about. Paving over nature, and that brings me to the Matrix. So the Matrix, what is the Matrix? The Matrix is, let's just say it's a architecture of control. So um, this enters into politics and it enters into every facet of our lives. And I just want to give some hot takes about how I perceive things. And I think it might just be kind of interesting. So, I've made a list of ideas I've had over the last week or so that are circling. So, the first one is Robert Sarpovsky, I think is his name. Or is that the guy from Girls? No. Anyway, he's a professor at Stanford who did a book on free will and gave many interviews. You can find interviews on YouTube about how he doesn't think there's any free will. He thinks that part of the brain, I think it's the front, the neurocortex, um, reacts in ways to situations that anybody, given that certain combination of scenarios, would never make another choice. So that means we don't have free will. So, a conclusion that he came to is that we should not have praise or blame. Praise would be to enforce a choice. This is me talking about it, but praise would be to enforce a choice, to reinforce a choice someone made, but there is no choice. And blame would be to, block a choice that somebody made or punish them, let's say, um, and that we still didn't have a choice. So there's no praise or blame. Then people say, oh, but I want praise, Perhaps we could have validation or reinforcement without praise on the individual. But if we take a step back from this, this professor at Stanford, talks about how we don't live in a meritocracy. It's almost like I'm saying now that we pretend to live in a meritocracy because we say this person shows this hard work or talent, and like let's say Steve Jobs became a hero of our society, or Elon Musk, because they have high intelligence, talent, hard work, and up and down the line of all of humanity, we believe in a meritocracy, or we want to believe in one. But I'm thinking of that as part of the architecture of a intellectual ideological matrix, because we don't live in a meritocracy. That's, you know, we don't live in a pure meritocracy, but I'm suggesting that a meritocracy would be impossible if we say that free will doesn't exist, or if we don't. I think that um, part of our political structure or our political ambition has been to even out and make it so people that are going up the hierarchy, people can ascend the hierarchy in class, in ability, and what they offer society, in their how much money they have, how much esteem they have, um, and increase their merit, thereby increasing their contribution to society, thereby receiving back benefits from that. But what I'm going to lay out and what I'm laying out right now is that is an impossible task, and that is judged by the values of merit equaling what you get. What you put in is what you get. That's not correct, because, um, well, in general, I think we can see that even in terms of wealth, just because you have wealth doesn't mean that you've provided value to society. And I think it's Pinkner. I don't know, I'm really bad with this, but the person who talked about intergenerational wealth being a main, uh, the main source of wealth for people. It's just passed down. So um, there's no meritocracy to that. All right, doing something that feels uncomfortable, like doing without plastic, allows us to grow. Okay, plastic. Plastic makes it impossible. That's my hot take. So, plastic, if we think about it, it's the architecture of our ideological matrix. It's the architecture of our society, plastic. Because what is plastic? It's cheap to make and it's harmful. And we're all now made of little bits of plastic. And these companies have made outrageous sums of money from plastic. Because if you make ultra processed foods, it's really not the Cheetos that are the product, it's the packaging and delivery of the product to you through plastic. Because plastic costs nothing to the company, but it also doesn't biodegrade in our lifetimes. Or it doesn't biodegrade at all, but it will be diminished over a very long period of time. Like thousands of years, let's say. So, why do we allow this? Well, we allow it because our value system is based on okay, they made money. We we're happy for that. That's business. That's capitalism. They must have had some sort of merit, or else they wouldn't have had money. So, but the cost of that is on all of us. The cost of using plastic bags, plastic everything. There's plastic in this frame, you know. Um, so if we had approached our production and use of plastic with fear and trembling, let's say, from the beginning, then we would not be in this situation. But we we have given in to plastic, and plastic is now part of our body, our brain, literally. There's plastic in our brains. Um, I'm looking at my glasses right now. These glasses are made of plastic. They were made for military. They're called BCGs, birth control glasses, because they're supposed to be so ugly. But they're cool. People like these glasses. But this could be a good application of plastic, hard plastic. But also unnecessary. But let's say I wear these vintage glasses, repurposed glasses for my, the last ones I had were the same pair, or the same type. I wore them for over 10 years. These probably will last that long as well. So these correct my vision. So, and if these could be recycled or reused, that would be a really long-term use of plastic for human benefit, I think. So, if we were less about using plastic as packaging and delivery, and we voted with our wallet for real, and we didn't accept plastic, that would be a really big step, I think, in moving out of the matrix. I wrote here that plastic is the architecture of the matrix because it doesn't biodegrade. It's not of this world. It is artificial. You think about the Bubble Boy film or Bubble Boy idea. Um, are we all bubble boys because we need a life wrapped in plastic? What is the limit of using plastic? How does it limit us? How does it improve our lives? How does it limit the future or future generations? How does it improve our lives? How is it in the chains? Are we bound up by plastic chains, ideologically and physically? What jobs would we have if we didn't have a world of plastic? If we didn't have companies that depended on plastic? Would we have better companies? I think so. So we produce it, but it's not part of the natural cycle. So it's like a drug. Right, it's an artificial drug. Plastic is a drug. Ooh, speaking of drugs, something about caffeine and neurodivergence that I'm thinking about. I'm really gonna think about that. That's pretty interesting. Maybe I think it makes me actually not focus, but it takes my awareness down a bit. So I think that it helps me to function a little bit because I'm not so up in the clouds, like big picture. So if everything is based in private funding, then futures cannot be secured if scammed. Okay, so here's something I realized that um, I recently heard of a person that is I'm aware of this person, and they are an older person with some health issues. Okay, they she is a widow. Okay, and she lives by herself. And have you ever seen the film Requiem for a Dream? It's not that she lives an existence like that, but that's an image I went to. Okay, so she was recently scammed because they made a call to her and they said to her, we have some money for you, but in order to give it to you, we need you to give us a small amount of money so that you can receive a larger amount of money. Now, on the face of it, it sounds ridiculous, but I have been the victim of scams before, and I consider myself hyper vigilant about my privacy. And there's a certain psychology. We can be manipulated, all of us, no matter how vigilant or intelligent we are. We can be scammed. You could say plastic is a scam, but let's back off from that. Okay. So this person is now, she has taken out phone plans for this, made gift cards, put all of her money into what she thought was going to give her money. Now she can't get a phone. Now, because they won't give her a contract because she signed up for phones that she no longer has access to. And she's lost her money, her savings. So she is looking for jobs and she found a job. She actually has a doctorate. So she found a job as a substitute teacher. Now she went to be a substitute teacher. Let's say she's in her 70s and she has health problems. They put her with the most urgent need for substitute teaching was with special needs kids. So she was assigned one special needs child to work with. And that child was running around and she tripped and fell. And they took her to the hospital. So, to address her hip, okay. I just looked at, I have a wound on my finger from working at a big box store recently. So, what is the. So, if we allow people to their ability to operate in the world, to get access to healthcare, to get access to money, that their personal money is the agency by which they have access to healthcare, have access to food, have access to shelter, especially as they're getting on in years, or they're a child, or they have a disability, like we all do. If we allow that human agency to dictate our humanity, our access to humane treatment, then, which is the reality of our society, and this is an example of it, then we deprive ourselves of humanity. She is deprived of humanity because she lost the agency of her personal wealth from a scam, which is totally understandable, right? Especially at her age. Who does she have to protect her from that scam? Her husband has died. Okay, I think I've made that point. So, if everything is based in private funding, if everything is dependent on your personal wealth, as we know, like even I saw like Mel Robbins was talking about how she like went bankrupt at some point. Now she's very wealthy now, but she's young enough where she could, and she's, so talented that, or whatever you want to say about her, or lucky that she was able to build that back up. But if you're 70 years old, you have no chance. And most people really don't have a chance at building back up. So, yeah, we can say, oh, they made mistakes, it's their fault. But really, if we don't live in a meritocracy, just by the reality of our situation, and we don't have free will, partly because we've developed an understanding of psychology as humans where we're able to, with a small amount of understanding, take control of other humans. And AI perhaps has done the same, but let's leave that aside for a second. So let's talk about a big box store. Okay, the way it's laid out, the colors used, social media, um, the way I psychologically talk to someone, um, even if they have a doctorate, even if they have what we would describe to be a high level of intellect, everyone, they should be at the top of the meritocracy, right? But everyone, no matter how much personal wealth you have acquired, no matter how much education, no matter how much talent or intellect, no matter how much focus or hard work, everyone is human, which means that they can be wiped out societally. Everything can be taken from them, their life. So we have to have a society that's built for that, not a matrix that engages with that or uses that. So I'm seeing that there's a hierarchy. The matrix is a hierarchy, and that we must move toward more egalitarian forms. We must move toward forms where everyone is taken care of, right? And this could be seen as a classic liberal conservative debate, more on the liberal side. But as I see it now, our political system is in the matrix where it engages in these, it's not even considering the types of reforms that would be required to enact this. It's in total block. So I'm thinking that there's going to be, people are saying that there's going to be, thought leaders are saying there's going to be a big period of transition coming, let's say next year, 2027, in the next 10 years, next 15 years, where we're rebuilding. Okay. So hierarchy. We're talking about politics as part of a hierarchy. Money is part of a hierarchy. People who have more psychological understanding or manipulative skills higher in the hierarchy. At the workplace, I was thinking for a while, and I asked ChatGPT, like, why wouldn't we have, like, let's say we have 3 levels of pay, as a transition. 3 levels of pay at any organization or company. Why not? Have like one level be right now, let's say a living wage plus. So let's say, I don't know, $85,000 a year. And then the next level would be, let's say $120,000 a year. And the next level would be $250,000 a year for the C-suite, the CEOs. And then, of course, ChatGPT was like, well, of course, that would be more egalitarian, but, it conflicts with the profit motive, right? But there's that Billie Eilish, she said, like, why are you a billionaire? She said that at some conference where she donated millions of dollars. She said, there are people in here with more money than me. Why are you a billionaire? Like, give your money away. And yeah, why do we have billionaires? Why do we allow that? There could be many reasons. One of them that comes to mind is that, we all aspire to be billionaires, so we want the chance to be one. Or we all aspire to be higher in the hierarchy, so we all want a chance to be one. But what if we just flatten the hierarchy and not completely? I'm not saying completely flatten it. That's impossible, but, or in a very near term. I'm not saying it's impossible in the long term, but people, but if we elevated the lowest tier, like right now, I'm getting paid $15 an hour, but I'm not sure how I would live. And the person I'm working alongside is very social, and she's very kind and gives me just positivity all day long and says hi to me. And she's helping customers and she's consoling customers if their debit card doesn't work or if they don't want to buy something because they spent too much money, or because their child is crying or whatever. She's adapting to those situations. She is a single mom and she's getting paid $15 an hour. She's working a seasonal job. So for me, I'm living with my parents, so I'm saving this money. I'm not spending money on food right now or rent, but she's supporting herself. And she said, on the first day we trained together, she said, I'm broke. I need this. So how many hours can I get? So that struck me because she's so capable, right? There's no reason why there should be a deadline on this job for her. She's great at it. She's better at it than I am. When her kids are at school, this giant corporation that makes billions of dollars every year can afford to pay her $80,000 a year. When her kids are at school, she can work there, and that's affordable for the company. But right now, all of that money is going toward executive compensation, marketing, um, creating products or delivering products that are worthless to society, plastic wrapped junk that sits on a shelf. Um, Basically, a company or an organization that has no value or values. So I remember in the 90s, there was this big drive for companies to have mission statements. And there was Simon Sinek more recently that was talking about the power of why, or the why of a business or a company. I think that's, for the most part, lip service. And kind of like, ooh, helping rich people to realize, or people in positions of power and businesses to feel good about what they're doing, which is living a life deplete of values, really. Um, so there are psychological studies. They have interesting names. There's one that's like Lebson Mott or whatever. I'm sorry, I don't have specific names, but I should have done that. But it says that wealthy people or people in positions of power think that they're victims. They have this sense of victimhood. And we see that, let's say, in not wanting, developing a deeply conservative sense that you don't want to pay taxes or things like that. But think about how that affects the people of power, the elites of our society. The fact that they all feel like they're the victims. So they look at people that are serving them in terms of employees, in terms of servants, in terms of everyone in their life, because they're empowered to purchase servitude or to seek rent. And they look at them as, it's almost like, I'm creating your job, I'm giving you my money, my value, and I'm supporting you. So I'm the victim. But if all you're feeding your kids is candy, you're not giving them a nutrient rich diet. And if all your products are plastic, metaphorically, then and you're not supporting your workforce. Most of these companies cannot afford human workers in the sense that I ascribe affording. Affording is a living wage. If you're not willing to pay a living wage, we should make it a requirement that you do in order to use humans. So AI, hopefully, or dystopianly, I don't know, is going to replace a lot of those traditional roles, and it's going to disrupt our society. But the value of humanity from a humanist or from my perspective remains the same, and it hasn't been valued. Humans have not been valued enough, and so as we move into this next phase, I don't think that they're going to suddenly start to be valued, and that's going to reflect in our post AI world. Unless AI corrects our shit, basically. Okay, so think about this hierarchy. Instead of a manager, why don't we have coordinators? What's the difference? A manager is someone who tells you what to do. In HR speak, it's X factor. Versus Y factor is when we're working collaboratively. But there's no organization I've been a part of that actually thinks that's possible and has enacted it properly. Sorry, let me mute this. So let's have project managers and coordinators working with us in a level playing field rather than this, because this creates a lot of waste. Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber talks about how a lot of 50% of people aren't doing anything or more. Think about that. We have a fiat system, a illusory system of employment already, where people are getting paid to do nothing. And then the people who aren't getting paid very much aren't doing much. And even if you work really hard for your money and you're making a lot of money, think about, what are you actually making? Are you making K-cups? Are you making something of value from your value system? Or are you making vapor, right? Are you just a cog in a wheel, part of a system, just at a higher level? I feel weird about that a little bit, but I don't want to step too far that way. So okay, so yeah, let's talk about waiters. I know waiters and I know bartenders that are some of the most amazing people I've ever met, and I love them. I'm imagining them right now, because that's one way that someone with a magnetism can make a little bit of money. With a lot of magnetism, they can make a career out of it. But let's think of it from the other side. Being waited on, being served, that's servitude. So what if we took away this, you go to Asia and you're, Or you go to France, and a lot of the places, you just sit down, you order your food. I was at a Chinese restaurant in Japan, and Japan is all like, very much about service, very much about attentiveness, but also in a different way than is expected in the United States with our tipping culture and whatnot. But I'm at a Chinese restaurant in Tokyo, and it's almost like offensive, the contrast, because you call them over when you're ready and you tell them and they don't comment on it. And they're like, okay, all right, all right. And then they go back and they cook it themselves and they bring it out when it's ready. And that's refreshing. That's cool. That person is serving. And that's their business. They own that restaurant, let's say. Okay. So contrast that with I'm expected to put on a face or a mask for this restaurant, which I get paid $2 an hour plus tips. So I'm working for tips. So I'm working for the person at the table. But if you're the person at the table, get your own damn food. Let's get our own damn food. Or if I'm the person at that table, let me go up to a register and order it. And then have the restaurant pay for them, pay for a human being to be part of that organization, pay properly. Why do I need someone to come down with a plate and put it in front of me? I don't need that. And, less and less do I really need people cooking for me, serving me, cleaning for me. In Japan, they have an ethic where in schools when you're in like lower schools or like elementary school, you cook meals for each other, and one class will take over and cook rice and meals for the rest of the group. And that teaches cooking, and it teaches this communality. And then when you get to high school, you're still expected to be the janitors. There's still people that supplement that, like facilities people, which I think is great. But they're not having to do everything. Like, we can clean our own classroom, right? We can spend 45 minutes every day cleaning the floor, cleaning the surfaces. Many hands make light work, right? And then you may think, but what are the people who had those jobs going to do? Well, we're looking at a total collapse of the jobs bubble. Like, already we're seeing at every level of society, the jobs are going away. And what's going to replace that? Well, I'm hoping that what replaces it is meaning, purposes, vocation. People that interact with many different groups, let's say, and offer their specific skills and services. People that receive agency or digital, Jaron Lanier calls it digital dignity, where you make a piece of content and you always obtain compensation for that. We're making content just by getting directions somewhere. That's data. If every piece of content that we create or data that we benefited from that in some way, not completely perhaps, or not at first, but what if Google was a company that compensated all of its sources of data by some percentage. What about 50%? 50% goes to Google because they created the platform, and 50% goes to the user who created the data. That would be more equitable than having it be essentially 100%, except for content creators that reach a certain level, but that's still just a fraction of the data sources. So it's not all about this one-to-one, I do something, I work hard, I get this in return. That system hasn't been there. I mean, we reached peak that maybe in the 50s through 70s, let's say, before the 80s, when apparently there was a reset of some sort. I'm thinking of Reagan and in Britain, I forgot her name, but also just overarching in our society, elites wanted more. And so the balance was off struck, where now we think of humans as, we think of how they can benefit us, and elites use their power to restructure. And if you think about our democratic structure, it elevates elites. So what if we took the elite structure back down and had more emphasis on local governments? And that's what Alexis de Tocqueville talked about. He said, one of the things I can paraphrase from Alexis de Tocqueville is that America has to survive on local politics, but also, I think, local everything. We're seeing, people saying, I'm going to buy local meat, I'm going to buy local everything during this Black Friday week, this Thanksgiving week. And what does that do? It makes it more human. It says, yeah, I'm not going to support this matrix plastic, dehumanizing structure. I'm going to go this way. And that is part of our capitalism. That's a choice we get to make. That is our own free market. We get choice. And the choices we make form the society, and the thoughts we think form our reality. Like recently, I heard someone say that they're realist, and my immediate thought was, that probably means that your life is feeling good to you because you are a realist. The reality that you have created through your thinking of the world is working for you, so you want to support that. So if you create your own reality and you're a realist, then you've created a good reality because you support the real, which you've created. Okay. Medical bankruptcy. So medical bankruptcy. What that means in the terms of what we're talking about is that you have been scammed out of your humanity, a certain part of your humanity. I think it's humanity or humane to get to get sick or to have a problem. Or, I mean, you could even say that we are victims. I mean, this is a small example. I was opening a box of virtual reality headsets to stock them on a shelf, and I got cut. So part of my body was, and I'm using a box cutter all day. I'm getting up on ladders, coming down, and every time I think, I'm doing this to get pieces of plastic that wrap around people's faces for virtual reality headsets. I am putting myself in a position to lose my life or lose my health to elevate myself by $15 an hour, but potentially lose everything and elevate this virtual plastic thing structure up one point. But I could lose everything based on that choice. So that's an impossible choice. That's hard. Medical bankruptcy, the fact that someone is scammed out of their life and we think it's your fault. You're bankrupt. You can't be trusted. Social credit scores, financial credit scores, hierarchies of trustworthiness. Trustworthiness to work within the matrix. What is your matrix score? What is your Q rating? What is the score that you are ranked by how your sensibilities and your life circumstances, which have been determined for you in a non-meritocracy, can be capitalized upon? What's your score? Do you get an A plus? But whatever your score was, it's been assigned. Someone out there knows it, or some computer has it on file. I was watching Westworld, and he finds out that like the system algorithm figured out, spoiler alert, but the system figured out, it's like the beginning of season 4, that he's going to commit suicide. And it's high predictability. And that just like destroyed him. I remember he was working like taking criminal Uber jobs. It was like there's an app that shows him like criminal work he can do for a certain amount of money. Ooh, man, that shows deep. Okay. Taxes are complicated. Oh yeah, taxes. I was learning about neurodivergence. If you don't want to do paperwork, which a lot of people I know hate paperwork, and then a lot of people do. So certain types of autism lean into paperwork, and I've seen this where people love taxes. And then other types of, let's not even say neurodivergence, let's just say humans, okay, because we're all on the spectrum. So certain types of us, humans, despise paperwork and can't do it. But so why are taxes like this? Is it because TurboTax and H&R Block have like, lobbyists? Probably. But the basic structure of our society is inhumane because it doesn't accommodate. It allows people with the ability to hyper focus and enjoy of that to um, to be the masters of the people who don't. They gain the benefits and they are elevated while the others are become their servants. Because then they rent seek, they use that extra money they get from tax obsession to rent seek on people who don't. So, whatever type of autism you are is part of your score of how well you're going to do in our society. So, the taxes are complicated unnecessarily for autistic people who like data entry. They're going to be the people who succeed. Great. Awesome meritocracy. Money is the key to unlock humane treatment. Okay, so this is money the matrix? Because the only way to stay safe is to have money, right? People, you will not stay safe without money unless you're Krishnamurti, who says, "Oh, so you're poor? Who cares?" That is out of the matrix thinking, out of the money thinking. So, for example, bail, our bail system. Why can you pay to get out of jail? If we have a justice system, how much money you have factor into that? Well, it's a pressure release valve for the wealthy. Okay. But if we back up and zoom out from that, why does our justice system prioritize punishment? Money can buy you getting out of punishment. But if our justice system was based on rehabilitation or reformation, let's use Scandinavia as an example of that, where it's viewed as reintegrating somebody into the society, a humane society, as they seek to find. So, if we move away from punishment, of course, you're going to want to buy your way out of punishment. Because using money is a form of punishment, but it doesn't affect everyone the same. So, in this case, money buys humane treatment. But if our justice system wasn't based on punishment or diminishing humanity, and it was based on our humanity and integrating our humanity back into society, integrating our humanity back into ourselves, then bail would not be necessary. I mean, yeah, like in the South, in parts of the South, okay, we have prisoners who are working for nothing. Okay, that doesn't help them to integrate into our society based on money. There are cooks at Golden Corral who are prisoners who the prison system is taking 60% of their pay, or 40%, I don't remember, or all of it. There are prisoners working for free for our benefit, or for the benefit of companies and the government, to get more money for what? To pay the politicians? So That doesn't help them to work at Golden Corral. And then the customers of Golden Corral or Tyson Foods or any of these other places, even McDonald's in some cases, the employees, they don't have a vested interest in working or preparing safe food for anyone. So the workers don't benefit, the customers don't benefit. So why are we allowing this? We're not benefiting from it. But you don't have to engage in that system if you're wealthy. You might not go to McDonald's. You might not work in this workplace. Why are you wealthy? In most cases, it's because your privilege was passed down to you in some way. Okay, but that's a special case. There's a lot of there's not that many elites. So, but those people, they have a victim mentality, and they need to switch that. We need to switch it, where we take responsibility for everything, basically. And part of why I'm talking about this is I'm trying to adjust how I'm both a victim and I'm also responsible to talk about the way I see things. I'm a victim and I take advantage of the fact that I'm neurodivergent. I'm realizing this. So I see all these layers, I see all these connections between things. But I have an anti-institutional bias, which means that, I don't, I see the drawbacks of institutions quite strong, but I don't often see how they can benefit me. So I see that bias within myself, but but coming back to this, does recycling help climate change? My personal decision to help climate change? Not very much. Not very much. But my inner world creates the reality. Both the reality I see and the reality itself. So, in science they say if you focus on a blur, it becomes a point. If you focus on a line, it becomes a wave. They've proven in science that at the particle level and in general, attention changes things. It's not that it changes your perception, it changes what you're perceiving. So, if we put our attention on our society, it changes it. It's not the act of recycling, it's the awareness of. It's not the act of, is this person my servant? It's the awareness of their complicated existence and their humanity. And your everyday interactions with people, like how you treat a cashier, because how you treat a waiter, how you treat your children, how you treat yourself. This is the architecture of breaking out of the matrix. This is the architecture of the real world. The real world. Because my spiritual claim, my spiritual awareness, my spiritual awakening was that we are all one. And that sounds maybe hokey or woo-woo, or is hokey even a word you can say? I don't know. that's the foundation of this. Is once I realized that there are no ugly people. Everyone is beautiful. There are no weak people. Everyone is strong. Everyone has something to offer. There aren't smart people and stupid people. There are a million types of intelligence. There's a type of intelligence for every person in the world. Everyone has something to offer. Everyone's part of me. You know, the spiritual concept, I think it's Hindu, is metta. Metta, which means a feeling of positivity or a feeling of compassion for the whole world. Everyone. Everything. And when I was younger, I had these sensitivities, but I thought that the hierarchy was real. I thought that there were people that were smarter or less smart. I thought that there were people that were more beautiful or less beautiful. For example, on the beauty front, you know, how much of thinking someone's beautiful is seeing the symmetry of their face to try to calculate their how their bacterial composition or microbiome in order to figure out whether or not they would have a good child with you. Well, I'm a gay man, so I need to especially get myself outside of that because I'm not trying to have some children, right? So being aware of, from my perspective, I can't say everyone would see them as beautiful or everyone would see them as ugly. No. I mean, the more and more that I realize or uncover this, or take off these masks or these ideologies or these matrix, the more I get out of the matrix, the more I see beauty everywhere. And I've experienced joy from that. And my intention is not to lay waste to everything in our lives by speaking this way. My intention is to just express myself because I think about these things and, you know. So I wrote here, smartphones are the ultimate fidget. Neurodivergence. Okay. So I guess according to ChatGPT, I'm ADHD adjacent and autism adjacent and INFJ. And okay, so, and there was another one. So highly sensitive. Okay. So I'm on YouTube a lot. I spend a lot of time adjusting between transitioning between situations. I always have iced coffee or soda, cold soda. I like cold, I like carbonated, I like caffeine. I like hearing people talk. It was difficult for me to read books. But once I got audiobooks, you know, I just listen all day. Listen all day. So that has been something I realized today, is that how that's linked to neurodivergence in my particular neurotype, let's say. But I also want to speak from, I know that I haven't had a lot of money in my life, okay? I heard some average income. I haven't ever made an average income, actually. I think I've never made above, even when I was working full time, I never made above $40,000 a year. And I have no savings. Right now, I'm working that job, and um, I'm planning to move to another country, um, because environment's important to me, and walkability is important to me. I haven't needed to afford a car because I don't feel comfortable driving. It's very stressful for me. I need to be able to walk. I need to be able to move my body, get fresh air, be out in nature, because my environment. All of these things are related. But what I'm coming back to is I have this perspective. I'm aware of my own bias, but I have this perspective because I've, throughout my life, I've been exposed to very wealthy people. It's like me myself, I have benefited from connections to wealthy people. They often have, um, there's topics of conversation. They buy me restaurant meals. I'm always benefiting from people who have wealth. I went to wealthy schools, through bachelor's degree all the way through. I went to private schools. Um, but I've also, right now, I'm working at a job where no one has, I'm stocking the shelves with game systems that the people stocking the shelves cannot afford to buy. And they tell me that, and I'm like, hey, is there any games you like? It's like, I can't afford this. And affording is different choices we make, but um, also not. Anyway, my point that I'm trying to come around to, what I wrote here was, money protects people from confronting reality. So if you have, one time I asked someone who was wealthy, an older woman, and someone who I deeply love and respect, I asked her, what does it feel like to be wealthy? And she said, I've been asked this before, and I'll tell you, you just get used to it. It becomes your reality. And that's human. You're not less human because you're wealthy. But perhaps you're less, I'm saying that perhaps you're less connected with reality, and perhaps significantly so. So you could say money is the matrix, insofar as the more plastic, the more dependent on money. I saw someone say recently on video, if you make $150,000 to $250,000 a year, companies, that's the sweet spot for companies, because you're going to elevate your lifestyle at that point so much that you'll never get out of debt. Like, you'll buy a big rock for your wife, you'll buy cars, you'll buy houses, and you will indebt yourself to a point where you'll have a great lifestyle. But when I do seasonal work, I kind of break even. I've been doing these jobs, and I end up just spending the money on the way home, eating apple fritters. I got a pedicure, bought some flights, but I was rooming with people that have no money. I was working with people that live on tips. I was I've had bosses that, told me to clean the toilet. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, people who clean well, that is so magical. I mean, you think about Marie Kondo, like she's a wealthy person who can clean and declutter really well, which we think of as, oh, you're a cleaner, you're the bottom of the hierarchy. Well, if you look around some of these, look around your house, like we could all benefit from some genius in that area. But she's the lucky one, right? So money protects people from confronting reality. I see this just on a daily basis. Like you can buy your way out of into conveniences, and I do it. Everyone does it, but especially very wealthy people can buy their way out of not only conveniences like having a um, living farther away from your work, having a nice car, air conditioning, travel and leisure, um, even, investments, of course, that's part of the what keeps you there. Um, Adjusting to your own neurotype, sure. Um, but those conveniences come at a cost to others. There's there's no amount, nobody can really afford to have services if they paid a living wage. But you have to be willing to pay a living wage in order to afford to enlist the services of a human. And humans are involved in all of the services. But you're paying companies as an intermediary to those humans. So you think, oh, I'm getting a good deal. But, for example, let's just think of dog food. Okay, so you're all the way down the line from growing grain, animals, feeding animals, housing animals, the animals themselves, the processing of the animals in the factory, the killing of the animals, the to turn into feed, the packaging of the feed. Um, that process has been optimized not for human support, but for um, business optimization, for money, optimizing the money to the top. So when you purchase dog food, you're purchasing into an idea, which is that that company provides value for its employees and for the animals and for the farmers and for the factory workers enough for me to use this amount of money to exchange for it. But I'm telling you that that is almost never the case. Like, what company provides a living wage? A wage in which people aren't expected to sacrifice their future, their body, and their humanity to provide that service to you. Name a company. But how many companies do you interact with every day? And is that a good exchange? I would say that plastic makes it possible, the Matrix, because we're wrapping up in plastic the idea, the product, but none of these products, all of these products are treats. Americans love their treats. I heard Hassan Abi say that recently. Americans, the only thing we have left is treats because the system has created where people are just fighting over treats. So, what treat are you choosing? And the reason I say wealth disconnects you from reality is because of that. There's so many intermediaries between that purchase you make. Whereas if you were forced to confront reality, let's say you were forced to make food for your dog, or educate your own children, or clean your own toilet, or entertain yourself, or provide community for people, everyone around you in your community. If your community was based on mutual values of interdependent support, we wouldn't have these companies, we wouldn't have these products, we wouldn't have this disparity of wealth or disparity of humanity. So, oftentimes, let's say wealthy people look back on the time before they were wealthy for real experiences of reality. Maybe they think they're looking back on their childhood because that was before they had money. And that was a formative experience indeed. But perhaps they're just looking back on the time before when they were actually connected. And so this isn't when they were not in the matrix, you know. And so this isn't disparaging wealthy people. It's more just kind of my hot takes, my political orientation, the things I've been thinking about recently when I'm stocking the shelves with VR headsets and cutting myself. And these are some of the experiences that led me to think in this way. And I want to thank you for listening. And I want to leave it there. Thank you.